What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry. Great episode for you lined up today. We're talking to Dave Zangaro, Eagles insider for NBC Philly, somebody who's covered this team for a long, long time and has all kinds of intel on one A.J. Brown. No, friends, the A.J. Brown dream is not dead. If you're somebody who has been clamoring for a true number one receiver for Drake May in this Patriots offense, that's what A.J. Brown would be. 4 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons in Philly, and it looks like he's available. Let's tell you about everything we have been hearing about A.J. Brown and his potential availability and his possible fit with the New England Patriots, and then we're going to launch right into our conversation with Dave. But first and foremost, it's important to note, the Eagles have already acknowledged that they're open to taking calls on A.J. Brown in not so many words. Howie Roseman is on the record saying he would never hang up on any general manager calling him with a potential deal. So right then and there, he's telling you they're open for business. He understands what the storyline is on A.J. Brown. He understands what the body language and the narrative has been with A.J. Brown over the course of the last year or so. And so for him to say anything but A.J. Brown's going to be a Philadelphia Eagle, we're hanging up on anyone who calls, we're in a championship window right now, he's still a fantastic player, he's on a reasonable contract, and we are not trading him. Anything aside from that is an acknowledgement that he's available. And so with as many trusted sources talking about this both in the league, plugged in people in Philly like Dave Zangaro, like Jeff McClain, Albert Breer's writing about it in his Monday morning column today, and we'll share some of the details there. A.J. Brown can be had. The question is, for how much? And I can tell you, I spoke to one executive in Indy just a few days ago, and he suggested something similar to, this is an interesting name because these two guys played college football together, something similar to the deal that got DK Metcalf from Seattle to Pittsburgh could end up being what A.J. Brown goes for. That was at least in his opinion. When you're looking at the two players and where they're at, A.J. Brown potentially, if it's going to be similar to DK Metcalf, would then be going somewhere, whether it's New England or elsewhere, maybe for a second-round pick. That deal for DK Metcalf, let's pull it up right now. The Seahawks ended up receiving the number 52 overall pick, so mid to late second, and they gave away, along with Metcalf, a 6th and a 7th round pick. So call it what it is. It's basically a second-round pick for DK Metcalf. Now, Metcalf also needed a new deal, and so that's where these two contract situations and these two player situations don't really align, right? So Seattle gives him away. Pittsburgh acquires him knowing they're going to have to pay him in addition to giving up that second rounder. A.J. Brown's contract's a little bit different. And Albert Breer had the details on SI.com on Monday saying it's essentially a 2-year, $50 million deal. He has 29 guaranteed for him in 2026, and then he has 21 coming his way in 2027, and then there are team options moving forward thereafter. So 2 for 50 total, right? 25 per is a very manageable contract for a guy who is still, in my opinion, a number one receiver. And we're going to get better intel in terms of what exactly physically A.J. Brown is right now. So the contract is manageable unless he threatens to sit out, unless you give him a new contract, then that makes him even more valuable than Metcalf, in my opinion. So you're talking, if we're going to be reasonable about this, you're talking at least a second-round pick. And if you're the Patriots and you're picking in the 60s in the second round and you have as much competition potentially as they might have in terms of trying to acquire this player, you're probably going to need to do better than a second-round pick. It's going to be a second plus. If you're talking about, if we're also going to be in the mix with, whether it's Kansas City, maybe it's Buffalo, there's a number of teams that could use A.J. Brown's services. And so if they're willing to give up their second, but they don't want to go much higher because of where their first pick resides in the first round, then to the Patriots, in order to trump those offers, do they have to offer up number 31 overall? That might end up being what it takes. Now, according to Albert, the ask is higher than that. The Eagles want a first-round pick and another top 100 selection, according to Breer. That's similar to what the Packers got for Devontae Adams a few years ago. That's Howie Roseman shooting for the moon. That's Howie Roseman trying to establish a market, trying to see who the true suitors for A.J. Brown services are. He's trying to get a feel for who's going to be willing to give something up of true value. But a first and another top 100 pick for the Patriots, that'd be their first and their third-round picks in 2026. And that, I'm sorry, is just too rich. As good a player as he is, understanding that he is about to be 29 years old, he did not look fully like himself last year. And again, we'll talk more with Zangaro about exactly how he looked. But he either lost a step, is what it looked like to someone from afar observing him, or he was just that checked out on maybe the quarterback play, maybe the offensive scheme, and that led to maybe some disinterest on the field and something less than A.J. Brown's 100% self out there in action. He also has dealt with knee issues, and this is something that plagued him in Tennessee. It's part of the reason, reportedly, the Titans didn't want to extend him 4 years ago before he ended up in Philadelphia. So this is something that you're also going to have to factor in. On top of it all, when I asked about offseason spending and where that would reside this coming year to Elliott Wolf at the Combine, he acknowledged it can't be an annual occurrence for them to be at the top of the NFL. So if you have a certain amount of dough set aside to fill real, tangible needs on your roster in free agency, and maybe one big swing mixed in there, it's got to be done in such a way, in my opinion, that they are, once again, not at the top of the league in terms of spending. That's where they were last offseason. They were top half of the league 2 off seasons ago. I don't believe you're going to see them again somewhere in the top 5. I just don't. Elliott Wolf said it himself. It can't be an annual occurrence. That's just the reality of the NFL. They have bosses to report to. They have budgets to try to adhere to. Again, it doesn't mean you don't have room for one big swing. Maybe that's A.J. Brown. Maybe it's Max Crosby. Again, it's not going to be both, right? Max Crosby, we're talking about a first-round pick in all likelihood as well. So you've only got one first-rounder, and it's number 31. You want to use it on a Crosby deal? You want to use it on an A.J. Brown deal? You want to use it on a right tackle of the future? There are some names there, and we'll talk about those this week, that you might just want to draft and have that guy, whoever it is, replace Morgan Moses. Maybe there's a starting receiver at the bottom of the first round that you could be interested in if you end up missing out on A.J. Brown. You've only got one of those. So you're not going to be able to get all 4 of those things because you have one asset that helps you land one of those 4. So if the spending is going to be what it is, and if Howie Roseman's asking price is going to be through the roof, my guess right now is it's not likely that the Patriots land A.J. Brown. That doesn't mean that it certainly will not happen. We are leaving open the possibility. The dream is not dead. We've already declared it. We can't then 5 minutes later kill it. Okay? So we're not going to do that to you today. And especially you would leave the door open because of Mike Vrabel's affinity for A.J. Brown. When he was asked about the relationship he has with Brown, knowing he's under contract with another team, knowing that people know that the Patriots might want to try to acquire him this offseason, knowing that A.J. Brown is probably there to be had, if not being shopped. Here's what he had to say when he was asked about the relationship with Brown and how much it's meant to him.
You know, we reach out and text each other during the things that happen good to each other, and sometimes things don't go so well for the people that you're close with, and you text those as well. So it's a two-way street of support and reminders of what got us to where we are here today.
The Eagles GM basically asked for trade offers for him yesterday. Is that something you might kick the tires on?
Well, I think that we'll look at everything that we can possibly look at to add to our roster.
So we won't rule it out. We're not going to do it. Relationship there. Elliott Wolf, Mike Vrabel, they both would acknowledge, hey, if the right move is out there, we'd be willing to trade that first overall pick for us at 31 overall. So the door's cracked open. The dream isn't dead. I just find it unlikely because I think it's going to cost them so much that it's going to make it really hard for them to figure out a way to bring in A.J. Brown. If they do, though, what kind of player would they be getting? And how realistic is it that the Patriots would be able to pry him from Philly, which is a team, again, is trying to win a championship next year? You're not getting a whole lot better on the field by trading away one of the best receivers in football, even if it is for a first-round pick. So let's answer those questions and more with Eagles insider from NBC Philly, Dave Zangaro.
Very excited now to have with us Dave Zangaro covering the Eagles for NBC Sports Philly. Dave, you've covered this team for over a decade. Nobody better to get A.J. Brown insight from than you. How realistic, tell us, is it that A.J. Brown actually gets dealt this offseason?
It's a good question because the Eagles ideally don't want to trade A.J. Brown. He's a great player. They have a much better chance of winning the Super Bowl next year with A.J. Brown on the roster, but you kind of look back at last season and it wasn't great. I don't think that's any secret that he wasn't a very happy player. He was frustrated throughout the year, and the problem with his frustration was that it showed up on the field. It's one thing if you're able to control it and it doesn't leak out into the product, but on the field, he looked like a frustrated player. So if it's going to be that again, I think that it's probably best for the two sides to move on. Now, there is a chance the new offensive coordinator in there, maybe he gets excited about coming back and trying this again. It's one of those weird situations where it might kind of be up to the player, because if AJ doesn't want to be there, I don't think the Eagles should want him there anymore.
Is it a question of finances at all for you? Because we've heard things about his contract that maybe it would make it really difficult for the Eagles to actually move on from him. How much of a barrier would his contract be to a trade this offseason?
Yeah, look, it's not easy to trade him because the Eagles, the way they do all their contracts is they backload, they paid out and bonuses. So it does make it tricky, especially if you're going to try to trade him before June 1st. After that, you're able to split it into the next season. It makes it a little easier, a little more palatable. So if they trade him before June 1st, and as we talk about trading him, it's all like maybe it would happen, right? But if they were to trade him before June 1st, I think that in that case, the compensation would need to be even greater because I don't think they have to be in a hurry to do this.
So if you had to peg it right now, and right, if it gets traded after June 1st, that's tough for the acquiring team, because they've already built their roster and, you're going to be up against it maybe financially, depending on the team. But if you had to peg it right now, would you say it is more likely that A.J. Brown will remain a Philadelphia Eagle, or it's more likely that he will be elsewhere?
Yeah, it's been tricky because I've been going back and forth on this. We do a stay or go series each year. I had him going just because at that point it just felt a little untenable. Now, within the last few weeks, there's better mojo around the team. There's a lot of excitement around the new offensive coordinator, Sean Mannion. I don't know what the conversations have been like between AJ and the building, if they can get him excited about potentially coming back. Because, look, I still think that is in their best interest to get a motivated AJ back on the field, playing at a crazy high level, one of the best receivers in the league. This is a team that still feels like their Super Bowl window is wide open. So trading one of the best receivers in the NFL doesn't work well with that. It doesn't really jibe. So I think ideally they're able to figure this out and keep him. But I'm curious to see what happens here, because if the player is unhappy, and a little speculation there, if the player is unhappy, then you might have to move him. And I think there's a lot of teams that would be buying for his services.
How much would it cost? If the Patriots end up calling Philly this offseason and it's, Mike Vrabel's calling Howie Roseman, and he says, what do you need for A.J. Brown? What do you think the answer will be?
Yeah, I think, especially with the Patriots, you look at that 31st pick. And I don't think that's a crazy price. I know that's a high price for a player. And you might be thinking, well, the Eagles don't really have any leverage if people know the player's frustrated. But I also think there are other teams that could get in that mix. And maybe a second-round pick would do it. I don't think the Patriots' second-round pick would do it. There's a really big difference between high in the second round and then late in that second round. So, yeah, I think 31 would have to be on the table if it comes to New England.
When we talk physically about A.J. Brown, what kind of player is he at this point? Dave, one thing that's been interesting as we've talked about A.J. Brown so much, it's really over the last couple of off seasons, it feels like. Albert Breer from Sports Illustrated, who's with us all the time, has talked about, he had this knee issue in Tennessee, and that was one of the reasons they didn't even really want to give him an extension at the time. And now we're several years removed from that. So has he lost a step? Is he still the star receiver that people think about in their mind's eye when they think about that name, A.J. Brown?
Yeah, it's a good question because it's one that popped up last year when his production wasn't there. And it was really tough to parse out, all right, what is the physical limitation? What is just the frustration in the offense? What is a function of the offense just being stale and not figuring things out? It was tough to figure it out. I can tell you the Eagles still think he's an elite receiver. The coaching staff still thought he was an elite receiver, and we would see it in spurts. It wasn't like he had an awful year. He still had 1,000 yards. It wasn't like he fell off the face of the earth, but I think there were questions around that, and we won't really know until either he's happy in Philly or he goes somewhere else.
Is it the kind of thing where, in the example I think that maybe Patriots fans would be thinking about would be Randy Moss. This is a long time ago, but I think at the time when they traded for him from the Raiders, people thought he was 1 foot out of the league, and he was, maybe physically kind of toast. He wasn't, clearly. Like, he still had plenty of juice. Is there maybe something similar happening here with A.J. Brown, where if you get a motivated and happier A.J. Brown, you actually might get a better-looking player on the field? Because just as an observer from afar, it does look like he's just, there might be like a little explosiveness that's not what it was 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, if there's a drop-off, I don't think it's like a cataclysmic drop-off. I still think he's a super athlete. There are some times, and he's had kind of like nicks and bruises throughout his career. That's kind of just what his career has been. But for the most part, he's been pretty healthy in Philly, and we've seen him have 2 1,400-yard receiving years. He's not that far removed from those, so I still think he's an excellent receiver. I still think he's a Pro Bowl caliber, all-pro caliber receiver. It's just he didn't show it last year.
Good player to have around a young quarterback?
Yeah, I think sometimes AJ gets a little misunderstood because of the frustration, because he's sometimes outspoken, especially in Philly. He was so outspoken about the offense needing to be better. In his view, like, that was part of being a leader, was not being afraid to say out loud what he felt needed to be said. I can tell you, in the locker room, his teammates love him. And I think sometimes that got a little lost in translation. Like, people were worried that he was a distraction and that sort of thing. Not in the locker room. I mean, his teammates really do like the guy, and I think that's important to note.
When do you think, I know we talked about sort of the calendar in terms of, pre-June 1st, post-June 1st, but when do you think a decision will be made on A.J. Brown as to whether or not he's part of the organization? Is it draft night? I mean, is it night one of the draft, and they're waiting for the Patriots or somebody else to call the first-round pick?
Deadlines kind of spur action like that, right? If you're up against it and all of a sudden you get he was traded on draft night from the Tennessee Titans. So sometimes those deadlines do kind of spur something, but the Eagles aren't going to be in a rush to trade him either. Like, if the compensation isn't what they need it to be, I think they're going to hold on to him until it is, or they can figure this out. I don't think they're going to need to rush at it, but I do think there are going to be a few teams fighting for him, especially in the AFC. Like, there are a few teams in the AFC who might be a receiver away. That can play in the Eagles' favor, because I think ideally, if they do trade him, I don't think they'd want it to be in the conference.
Just want to ask you, Dave, before we let you go, watching the Patriots from afar, how do you think, whether it's people in Philly, you guys know what a championship football team looks like, or others around the league that you've spoken to, is the belief in the Patriots there? Is it that, yes, they're legit and they're on their way to contention just about every single year because they've got a quarterback and they've got a coach, or is it more, they got a little lucky this year and we'll see where they go from here because they're really realistically still building?
Yeah, I think they probably arrived a little ahead of schedule, and sometimes we see that. We kind of saw it with the Commanders last year, a team that's a little closer to home, right? For me, at least, they had a young quarterback, really talented. It seemed like they were starting to figure it out, and then they took a big step back the following season. I'm not saying the Patriots are going to take a step back, but it did feel to me like they kind of got there quicker than everyone else anticipated. And sometimes when that happens, it's kind of circumstance, right? And that's not a knock on them. You play who's on the schedule, you play who you play in the playoffs. They did what they had to do, but I think, at least from other people from outside that building, from outside that team, I think that there's a little bit of that where they go, well, I don't know if they're going to be like a perennial competitor for a Super Bowl every year.
Two great teams, in terms of how they've built between Philly and Washington, both with young quarterbacks, right? So some similarities there. between the Patriots and what those teams are going through. Now, Jalen Hurts is making a lot more money right now than Drake May is, and so this would alter how the Patriots can build versus what the Eagles have been able to do. But there's one team that continues to have sustained success, and there's one team in Washington there that really fell off the face of the earth. What's been the biggest difference in terms of how those teams have built that, maybe the Patriots could use as a lesson moving forward this offseason?
Don't sign a bunch of old players like Washington did. I mean, it seems really simple and obvious, but yeah, they overspent in free agency on aging players, and I get the temptation of that. When you have a young quarterback who's not making a lot of money, you feel like there's like kind of change burning a hole in your pocket. It's probably not the soundest strategy for long-term team building, is throwing a lot of money in free agency at guys you have to overpay, because that's what free agency is. You're better off if you can. I mean, I think every team wants to do this, is just build through the draft, sign your own players, keep that core together. That's kind of what the Eagles have been able to do. That's the ideal way to go about this, but it takes good drafting.
Don't sign old guys. I like that.
Yeah.
Well,
not to be an ageist, but
no, of course not. But listen, I didn't say it. He did. Dave, thanks so much for being with us.
Of course.
All right, great conversation there with Dave. Really appreciate him being with us. Really appreciate you being with us as well. Let's keep our finger on the pulse as best we can with this A.J. Brown situation, because the Patriots need more juice in their receiver room. Whether or not they end up keeping Stephon Diggs, they need to improve there. Now, we know, and we reported it on this show and elsewhere, their priority, their number one need, looks like it's on the edge. And I get that. It's a premium position. You need help there. You might lose K'Lavon Chase onto free agency. But boy, to me, anytime you have a young quarterback who looks like a star and is going to be the engine that drives your team for the foreseeable future, to me, the priority should be supporting, protecting, helping in the growth and development of your young quarterback. It doesn't mean all of your investments come on the offensive side of the ball. You don't go full Bengals, okay? And even they just completely have whiffed on the offensive line portion of that thing. You have to continue to add to the defensive side. But offensively, your young quarterback needs help there. Even if he's going to be an MVP caliber player, he's going to be in the running for that award multiple times over the course of his career. It doesn't mean you drop it down on the list of priorities. Defensively, you've got two highly paid defensive tackles. You've got a cornerback who's about to be probably the most highly paid corner in all of football. You had a unit that, in many ways, ranked inside the top 10 last season. Maybe some of that was schedule related. I would acknowledge that. Look at some of the quarterbacks they played last year. But there's plenty of investing happening on the defensive side of the ball. Offensive line, receiver, you have to continue to support and nurture that young quarterback. But that's just me. Let's get into more of that next time we talk to you on Next Pats, and that'll be very, very soon. We've got a great conversation with JP Finley. Been covering the Commanders for years and years and years. We're going to get into why the Commanders are a cautionary tale for the New England Patriots, specifically this offseason, and how they handle their decisions this offseason over the course of the next month or so. Those Commanders, that blueprint that was laid out by Washington last offseason, why and how you can avoid that thing. That's coming up with JP Finley, and we're going to get into some combine winners and losers, and we're focusing specifically on positions that look like positions the Patriots will be investing in early. Make sure you keep an eye out for that one. We'll talk to you very, very soon.